A miracle happened in Tel Aviv last night when a Hamas terrorist bomb exploded prematurely, killing no one but the terrorist himself. Even the police are calling it an absolute miracle. Hamas has rejected yet another ceasefire deal with Israel mediated by Qatar, Egypt, and the U.S. And guess what? They are blaming Israel for the failed deal because Israel will not agree to their demands, which includes wiping Israel off the face of the map. Here is the real story. I'm Josiah, and this is the Israel Guys. Welcome to the Israel Guys, where we believe that in a world of Jew hatred and anti-Israel propaganda, you should have a direct connection to the land and people of Israel. So last night in Tel Aviv around 9 p.m., there was an absolute miracle. This happened. A massive explosion rocked the streets of Tel Aviv. When the police and medical personnel showed up on the scene, they found the unconscious body of a man with no pulse and multiple systematic injuries. Another man in his 30s was also found with moderate shrapnel injuries. The police have confirmed this morning that the explosion was indeed a failed terror attack. They weren't quite sure what this was, this explosion. But this morning, they have confirmed that this is an actual a failed terrorist attack, a suicide bombing, and thankfully no one was killed but the terrorist himself. The security camera footage of the suspected terrorist showed a man in his 50s walking down the street with a large backpack. You can see that video here. Right now, in the investigation, it seems like the backpack exploded prematurely. The police are calling it an absolute miracle. You know what? This is amazing that he could have gone to a more crowded area and blew himself up and killed many Israelis. And these suicide bombings go all the way back to the Intifadas. They use many of those going to crowded areas and just blowing themselves up, Palestinian terrorists. And indeed, this is another case of that. The police commander on the scene said, quote, "It is possible that the assailant planned to reach the nearby synagogue or perhaps the shopping center. We have no ability to understand why the bomb exploded at this point in time," referring to being prematurely. So that was what he said on the scene last night. Today, guess who took responsibility for this attack? Yes, you were right. Hamas has indeed taken responsibility for the attack and confirmed that this was meant to be a suicide bombing. They also warned Israel that many more suicide bombings would be carried out in Israel. Indeed, opening up another threat to Israel. This is not something that happened in Judea and Samaria. This is something that happened right in the heart of Tel Aviv, Israel's population center, and kind of opens up, even though this was a possibility before, now that Hamas is directly using this tactic now to try and defeat Israel, maybe defeat Israel's morale, and also just kill civilians like it is Hamas's whole goal in the very beginning to do. Thankfully, in this incident, no innocent lives were taken, and we can continue to pray for the complete recovery of the man who was wounded by shrapnel in this explosion. Unfortunately, there was another terror attack in Israel yesterday, and this one was successful. This was near the town of Kedumim. There was an attack in the industrial area of Kedumim. This Kedumim is about 15 minutes from right here where I'm sitting in the Israel Guys studio. Palestinian terrorist with a work permit in this Jewish town attacked a security guard with a hammer, stole his weapon, and escaped in a stolen car. Now, the roads around here were shut down for several hours afterwards as the IDF were looking for the terrorist, trying to prevent his escape. But as of this morning, as I'm recording the show, the terrorist has not yet, the IDF has not announced that they have caught the terrorist. He is still potentially at large. The security guard, the Israeli, was now identified as Gideon Perry. He's a resident of Kedumim and has a wife and 3 children. Please pray for his family and for his children, especially as they're left without a father. His wife was left without a husband. Tragic attack. And the craziest part about this all is that this attack, the place where this attack actually happened, was an Israeli industrial zone that employs both Israelis and Palestinian. Now, this Palestinian terrorist, because that's what he is. He's a terrorist, an absolute scum of the earth terrorist. He had a work permit to work in this Israeli industrial zone. So these Israelis were hiring him to work at this factory here, and he attacks a security guard, kills him, steals his weapon, and escapes in a stolen car. So what's going to happen? Now this industrial zone says we employ these Palestinians. We're trying to give them a good job. We're trying to help them. They provide good labor to us. We pay them. They get a very, very good salary from us, much more than they would get in any of these Palestinian towns. Now, these Israeli businesses, because of terror attacks that have happened like this before, with workers working for Israelis and then attacking their employers and attacking people in these factories, these companies are going to be much more hesitant to hire Palestinians now. Now you're going to have more Palestinians left without a job. Now, if this was in some other country and this was some just random acts of violence that would happen from so-and-so, then, you could continue to employ the people as long as they didn't condone the violence. What's the difference here in Israel? The Palestinians condone the violence. The Palestinians condone terrorism. The leaders are calling for it. The leaders are paying terrorists and their families to commit terror attacks against Jews. So, in order for Israeli lives to be saved, in order to preserve safety and life, these businesses have no choice. And I don't even know what these guys are going to do here in Kedumim, but if I was making the decisions, you would have no choice, right, but to fire all your Palestinian workers, because it's now a security threat, because their people are presenting a threat. They want to kill Jews. They want to murder Israelis. It's absolutely crazy, because now, if these factories were to fire all these Palestinian workers, which is completely reasonable considering the area, considering the history, considering all the facts we have on the ground, it's a completely reasonable conclusion after this terrorist attack and after the multiple terrorist attack we've seen like this in multiple businesses around Judea and Samaria. If this were to happen, then the national media, mainstream news, Al Jazeera will now accuse Israel of putting Palestinians out of work and starving children because they fired all these Palestinian workers. Guys, this is the way it happens. This is the way the media works here in Israel. It's absolutely crazy. And just looking at this, the logical solution is for Israel not to, unfortunately, they can't trust the Palestinians. They can't trust people to come in and work in their towns. And since October 7th, many Jewish towns, I know of quite a few personally, will not hire Palestinians anymore because the threat is just too much. It's exactly what happened on October 7th. Gazans that worked in these Israeli communities surrounding Gaza, the communities that are just enclaved around Gaza there, those Gazan workers were the one that provided information to Hamas to carry out the brutal massacre on October 7th. It's a logical conclusion, and that is probably what is going to take place here in the town of Kedumim. Since October 7th, over 600 courageous IDF soldiers have sacrificed their lives defending Israel from the malevolent forces of Hamas and Hezbollah. Their families are shattered, their wives are now widows, and their children are left without fathers. Think of Hadass Lowenstern, whose husband Elisha fell in battle, leaving her to care for their 6 young children, including a baby, all on her own. Or consider Neora Swid, whose husband Bechor heroically fought terrorists with his bare hands near Gaza before losing his life. Neora now faces the daunting task of raising their 3 beautiful daughters by herself. These IDF widows have lost everything. As they mourn their husbands, they are also struggling to meet basic needs without their family's provider. We cannot abandon them. Their husbands gave their lives to protect Israel and the free world from terror. Now we must protect their families who have sacrificed so much. Every dollar raised goes towards essential expenses like food, utilities, and clothing. Please give generously. Click the link below to support the heroic widows and orphans of the fallen IDF soldiers. Link is down in the description below. So this hostage deal, ceasefire deal that the U.S. has been setting their hopes on, their great claims, many countries around the world saying this is it. This is the deal that's gonna create peace in Gaza. So yeah, Hamas officially rejected the deal yesterday, presented at the summit in Doha, Qatar. And according to Hamas, I'm just going to read what they said about why they rejected this newest ceasefire deal. The proposal completely meets Netanyahu's conditions, and especially his refusal to a permanent ceasefire and a complete withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, and his insistence on continuing to occupy the Netzarim Axis, the Rafah crossing, and the Philadelphia corridor. It also adds new conditions regarding the exchange of prisoners and a withdrawal of Israeli positions in other sections, which prevents the success of the deal. So, Hamas, like every time before, they put forth a ceasefire deal, a hostage deal, which, by the way, most of the time has been very, very good for Hamas and good for Israel in that they would get some of the hostages back, but not good for Israel in that it inhibits their ability to wipe out this huge terrorist threat in Gaza. All these hostage deals that have been pretty good for Hamas, Hamas has completely rejected. And yet again, here they are rejecting this newest deal again. And by the way, Hamas is also now blaming Netanyahu for the failed deal. The Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, Hamas is blaming him for the failure of the deal, even though Hamas is the one that rejected it outright. So this will probably mean, unfortunately, and this is where the breakdown happens. This is where it is very tough on Israel, and this is where the security of Israel is very much threatened. Now what probably will happen is that major world powers like the United States of America will now start pressuring Israel to capitulate to what Hamas is demanding. Now, my question is, and this has been our question here at the Israel Guys ever since the start of the war, and ever since the nations of the world have been trying so desperately to attain a ceasefire deal with Hamas. My question is, how do you negotiate? How do you negotiate with a terror organization? How do you negotiate with ISIS? How do we negotiate with Al Qaeda? These people murdered over 1,200 Israelis in one single day on October 7th. They regularly carry out terrorist attacks inside of Israeli cities, inside of Judea and Samaria. They just tried to carry out a suicide bombing in the streets of Tel Aviv and vowed to carry out many more suicide bombings. Is this somebody you're trying to negotiate with? Is somebody you want them to, yeah, we'll sign a deal and we'll pinky promise not to attack you again and not to murder your citizens? And by the way, I don't even think that's in the hostage deal, but you're just letting these guys walk away. Thankfully, though, for Israel, Hamas rejected this deal because this deal would not have been a win for Israel, like most of the previous hostage ceasefire deals that have been presented over the past several months. The former Justice Minister Chaim Ramon said that this deal was, quote, the worst deal Israel could have agreed to. Now, my personal opinion is that the only ceasefire deal, you could say, ceasefire deal Israel should agree to with Hamas is a complete unconditional surrender by Hamas and a return of all the hostages, living and dead. Period. That is the only deal I think Israel should agree to. Why? Because that ensures, or at least on the outside, ensures security and stability for Israel. And ensure an unconditional surrender of Hamas. Israel can go in, de-arm all the terrorists there, blow up all their terrorist infrastructure, stop up the terror tunnels that are coming across the Philadelphia corridor that they've been smuggling arms from Egypt into Israel. Stop all that. Stop the money coming into straight to the Hamas authority that they've been using for arms, not to help their own civilians. Israel could go in and completely revamp the Gaza Strip, and they would get their hostages back, and that would ensure safety for Israeli citizens from this evil threat of Hamas. And by the way, I firmly believe that this could have actually happened a long time ago. Hamas could have been forced into an unconditional surrender and return of all the hostages if major world powers had sided 100% with Israel and had put the correct amount of pressure militarily and diplomatically on Hamas. I believe that a deal like this could have been reached many, many years ago, forcing them into surrendering and releasing the hostages, 8 of whom, by the way, are American citizens. The Biden administration still refuses to do this. Guys, don't forget to check out don't forget to donate to help the widows of the IDF. Check that out. Link is down in the description below, and help out these Israeli soldiers who have fought these families of the Israeli soldiers who have fought valiantly for the state of Israel. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. We love hearing your thoughts on what is happening, and please continue to pray for the nation of Israel. Israel is strong, and the people of Israel will continue to be strong, and the people of Israel will continue to live. Am Yisrael Chai. Guys, stop listening to the lies and propaganda and connect with the truth of what is happening here in Israel.